What's going on, guys? It's your favorite fast talking artist guy from the internet. Nah, I'm just playing. But yeah, so usually on my channel I do these Procreate time lapses or whatever time lapse I have, and I just do an art discussion, and that's what this is. Just like all those other ones, it's kind of like this. You know, sometimes they're different, sometimes they're shorter, sometimes they're longer, but I kind of lean this one towards probably being a little bit longer because this one's a quite deep subject. So art goals, right? So a lot of people have kind of different ideas of what art goals are. Some people just want to paint kind of like classical paintings, classical kind of dramatic Renaissance style paintings, and that doesn't really have a viable market in 2021. But at the same time, if someone was just busting out Renaissance paintings, I can imagine it probably would make its own market, right? And if somebody is doing that, please let me know. I want to see them. Please just send me a link, please, someone. Anyway, so art goals. So I think the art community is a bunch of different people at different skill levels, right? So I think comic book artists have a very specific skill level. But the thing is, you can't always tell somebody's skill level by what they do professionally. For example, professional inkers, they ink comic books, right? So you'd always think the penciler is the main talent, you know, with comic book drawings, but not all the time. Sometimes those pencilers are just the penciler because they got to that position, and there's an inker that is an equally as good artist but doesn't get the chance to do the penciling stuff because there simply isn't room for him, and he's already kind of carved out his market being an inker, right? Same with colorists. Some of these guys that are colorists are fantastic digital painters that are capable of like really good video game like concept art level work, but they are coloring comic books, you know. So, you know, what are your artistic goals? A lot of the time they align with where you want to get to. Now, I've looked at my life and I always wanted to do video game concept art because to me it felt the most fun. It felt like the most fun and kind of the most challenging and the most ground up job that you can get. And not even just video game concept art, but concept art in general. Movie concept art tends to be more reliant on 3D and photographs. So that's something I wanted to go into after, but I wanted to start off in video games where I could really just bust out my Photoshop brushes and my techniques that I've taught myself in. But what should your goals be, right? So your goals really should just be to be as good as the person who is working in the industry that you want to work in, and bring your own flavor to that thing. It's not always about competition. Being the best is a fantastic goal, and I used to write be the best on all of my sketchbooks when I was a kid, but really it's you're competing with yourself. Okay, be the best version of you, because everyone has different ideas. The thing about art, right, and this is something I've noticed, if you don't keep up with all of the trends, a lot of the time you can get left behind. So you better just focus on what it is that you can do specifically. For example, two of my favorite artists, and these guys are relatively similar to each other but still have differences. So Maciej Koczara and Wojtek Fus. They're both concept artists from Poland, right? Wojtek is my age. He's a little bit younger than I am by a month or something, and Maciej is an older guy. He's in his 40s or 45, kind of. He's in that age bracket. But they're both kind of renowned artists from Poland that both work as concept artists on films, and their style is very much, they use photo textures or they use photographs and they kind of paint over the photographs, and they've kind of gone into using 3D and stuff now. So their work is very much like, almost the stuff they produce is almost like finished product film frame kind of keyframe stuff. It looks fantastic, right? And I always liked that stuff, but I always realized that replicating that stuff in paint isn't really going to work. So you have to use the similar techniques. Now I know 3D, but I'm not really that up on my 3D game. So I'd have to realize that I'd have to get there first. I had to spend at least a year messing around with 3D, buying a bunch of tutorials, doing a bunch of work to get to that place of performance, right? Whereas if you want to work in a comic book industry, as we talked about originally, and let's use two comic book artists as reference then. Let's use Joe Madureira, who now is basically a concept artist, but he started out in comics, and Jim Lee, right? Both guys, fantastic artists, really, really good pencilers. Jim Lee sometimes inks his own work, but for the most part, they both, are just the pencil artists. And to get to their level, you'd have to study anatomy, you'd have to use reference, and you'd have to have a very defined style. Now, I picked those two because both styles are at the other side of the spectrum. Jim Lee's style is a little bit more realistic, and Joe Mad's style is a little bit more like anime, a little bit more cartoony and you know, dynamic and expressive. Now, you'd have to have an understanding of what makes your style unique to fit into that place, because no one has the same style, right? And that's what I think we have to understand. We have to understand that if we're going to be the artist that we want to be, our work is more the content that we create. Like when I spoke about Maciej Koczara and I spoke about Wojtek Fus, these two guys, their content a lot of the time is very cyberpunky. You know, it's very much like that. And they do have other work that isn't that way, but for the most part, it's very technological based. It's very much using photo textures to create realistic things with kind of technology influences and things like that. If you want to be a guy that just draws fantasy stuff, you should probably think about doing, you know, like trading card game illustrations, you know, or just book covers, stuff like that. You have to really understand the artistic goals aren't, I want to be this good. It's like, I want to work here. So to work here, what level do I have to get to and what skills do I need to learn? You know, and that's the important thing, understanding those skills. For example, another great artist, Evan Mel Amundsen. I'm pretty sure everyone knows who this guy is. And there's him and there's a few other guys very similar to him, but he's one that sticks out to me because he's always constantly working on his own project, Teng. And he also has, you know, a stream on Twitch where he streams a lot of his work, and a lot of his work is very much fantasy based. He doesn't do that much sci-fi stuff, and he does do work for Magic the Gathering and stuff like that. And his style is very much very, very heavily painted and well done fantasy scenes. And you know, they're perfect for like Magic cards. They're perfect for all those kind of trading card games that you can imagine, Duel Masters, all of those games. Mostly Magic the Gathering though, and stuff like, you know, what we used to classify as the Applebot illustrations and stuff like that, and all of these kind of things. You know, if that's what you want to get into, you have to understand what it is you're going to need to do. You're going to have to spend 20-30 plus hours per painting, you know. So, and when you get to a reasonable level as an artist, I think people need to understand this. When you get to a reasonable level, right, it comes down to being about you. What are you willing to do? Are you willing to spend 100 hours on something, one image? Are you willing to spend 50 hours on one image? Are you willing to spend 3 days laboring over one image? And I'm asking this because I haven't had that willingness for years, because I've been trying to be productive, and I don't classify that as productive. I classify that as hard working, and I prefer to work smart. Maciej Koczara could whip out an image of a very, very good hyper realistic damn near quality using all of his software, his 3D photo textures, all this stuff in 10 hours versus the 40 or 50 hours of an MML Amundsen doing it all from scratch. Which one are you wanting to be? Both get paid, both are renowned, but they both work very differently, you know? And that's kind of what I want people to understand, is that your artistic goals should be based on how you like to work and what you're willing to do. Now, I am willing to spend those 50 hours on a piece, right? But I have to have the time to be able to do that, right? If you have a bunch of freelance work, like right now, I am drowning in freelance work and commissions, right? So I don't have 50 hours to spend on one piece. When I'm spending, you know, over 10 hours on something, usually it's on my hard drive for years. And I forget about it and I make new stuff and I start stuff in Procreate and not Photoshop and away from the computer, and I come back to it and I'm like, this is cool. This is one of the most detailed things I've done, but I haven't had the time to just sit on it and make it work. So it's that understanding of what are you willing to sit down and do versus what do you idealize in your mind, you know? And just understanding that if you're a comic book artist, it might be the same thing. It might be 10 hours, it might be 1 page a day. If you're doing splash pages, it might be half a page for you know, full day, 12 hours of work in pencil. It might take longer, you know. Same with an inker. You know, inking is probably a shorter period of time because you're literally tracing the lines and you're making the lines kind of stronger to how you think they should work, and you're making shadows work a certain kind of way. And I'm not trying to take anything away from inkers. I'm just saying the original math that goes into designing a page versus refining a page is a little bit different, right? Colorists, your job's a little bit faster. I gotta be honest. Coloring is way faster than drawing or inking, but it still can be a laboring process if there's a bunch of characters all over the place. You know, I wouldn't want to ink one of those 6-page spreads that sprawls out of a comic. I wouldn't want to do that. But you have to understand, if you want to, you know, if you have an artistic goal, what are you willing to do to get to the goal, to make the goal work for you? And that is the most important thing. Understanding those things is what will essentially get you to the goals. You know, understanding what is needed. You know, some of the best artists I've met have an innate ability to just sit down and work, you know, and just work and not worry about things that they're missing out on, things that they're not doing. Whereas me, I like to have a bunch of things going on, and I like to kind of check in on each different thing and try and be productive, you know. So at some point, I'm sacrificing quality for quantity, and that is true, because I'm trying to get through a bunch of things, because I classify myself more as a designer than an artist. We're all still artists, but I've always classified myself as a designer. I want to make worlds. I want to provide experiences. I don't really just want to be like, oh, hey, check how nice my image is. You know, there is a part of me that wants to do that, but there's also a part of me that says, I'm not that bothered about making you think my image is really good. I'm more bothered about providing a design for you, right? So you have to really understand what your goals are. Are you a designer? Are you an artist? Are you an illustrator? That's another thing too. And illustrators also, their job is to make things look really good. That's another thing. You know, there's a bunch of different areas that we need to talk about, you know, maybe in another video, you know, the differences between each kind of segment. And I think that would be a great video. But people need to understand their artistic goals have to be based on what they are trying to do, what they're trying to get paid for, or what they're trying to get known for. That's what your artistic goals need to be related to. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching the video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.